It might be a sign of my advancing age, but it seems like every week a new phenomena goes viral on TikTok that is deeply stupid, but also very old and just repackaged. And this week, it has been moon phases, the idea that you can determine your relationship compatibility with moon phases. And that's been kind of interesting to me because astrology recently, which is an ancient thing, has got a massive, massive boost. It's incredibly popular with millennials, Gen Z, to a degree that makes very little sense. And it's worth talking a little bit about the two of these, their history, and why they're not taken that seriously to get to where we are now and try to understand that. So, the very first thing is, what does your star sign say about you? Literally nothing apart from some trivial information about the period of time in which you were born. That's it. Nothing else. Astrology is neither new nor clever, since as early as humans looked into the sky, we started making stories about the stars above us, and we started trying to understand these things that were on unfathomable distances from us. We had no idea what they were, so we made stories about them. The philosopher Maimonides said that astrology was not a science but a disease. And that might sound super modern, but he said that back in the 1100s, and quite frankly, he was late to the party. In Greek antiquity, the skeptical philosopher Canaides, I think I'm saying that right, said about 2,300 years ago that the problem with astrology is that it kind of denies free will, and it also nullifies the whole concept of morality. If everything's predetermined by fate, then there's kind of no point to doing anything. And he put a very good argument against it like that. In ancient Rome, a few hundred years later, the orator Cicero lambasted it as being plainly daft. He pointed out that two people could be born at the exact same time and have very different traits and outcomes in life. For example, Carmen Electra and Adolf Hitler share a birthday, but only one of those people would invade Poland. Joseph Stalin shares a birthday with Katie Holmes and Steven Spielberg, but I suspect Stalin would be more interested in gulags than, family entertainment. As I wrote in The Irrational Ape, or Good Thinking if you're in North America, for various reasons, people tend to believe in horoscopes and psychics due to a phenomenon called the Fourier effect. Usually this is because the pronouncements in horoscope are both vague, flattering, and they are seemingly specific to you, or at least you believe they are. No horoscope is going to tell you you need to talk to a therapist, you have serious personality problems. They're going to say something nice that makes you feel good about yourself, even if it's a criticism, they're going to say it in a really nice way. And because you believe it's specific to you, you rate it as more accurate. It's a form of confirmation bias where you go, well, that's about me. So in some experiments, researchers have mixed up the labels. They've given, say, someone who's Aries the star sign for Capricorn. If they really believe in astrology, they go, well, that really describes me. But then if you tell them that you've changed the label, they don't believe you. And funnily enough, people really do believe their horoscope is accurate if you give them a wrong, made-up reading. So that's kind of worrying. Tarot card readers and psychics use the same trick, by the way, the Fourier effect. They're always flattering, very rarely accurate. And that's before you consider the idea that a horoscope is basically telling you that 1/12 of all people on the entire earth are going to have a similar day, which is really hard to believe when you look at, say, someone living in a war-torn region who shares a birthday with someone living in a advanced, privileged Western background. They're going to be very different, and it doesn't take any stock of that. Also, horoscopes kind of provide people cover, don't they? You can say something, well, I did that because I'm a Pisces or I'm a Gemini and that's what we do. But no, it's kind of like you're an asshole who doesn't take responsibility for your own actions. And again, this goes back to relationships. Relationships cannot possibly be decided by star signs. So for example, let's take a standard Western astrology with 12 different star signs. If you take 12 things and choose two, a bit of maths you can do here, that is 66 possible combinations. That's a pathetically small number to capture every type of romantic relationship possible. And it gets even weirder when you consider the phenomenon of axial precession. When the ancient Greek forebears of us named these different constellations that we're so obsessed with, the world was tilted a different way than it is now. As it rotates, it tilts. So the star signs we look at now, or where we look out to and call them, they're not even in the same location as they would have been 2,000 or 3,000 years ago when most of them were named, or even before then. So the whole idea breaks down when you think about it. Now, what about the moon? The moon is much closer to us than any stars. This is a new branding, but an old idea, right? This is a TikTok trend to find one of your 8 phases of the moon and try to work out the complement for that. For example, if you're in a new moon, you need to find someone with a full moon and they go together and you do a side by side picture and you complete yourself. It's a nice image. It's a shame it's kind of nonsensical. There are, you could subdivide them more, but there's roughly considered to be 8 phases of the moon. That means if you pick one of them, you have a 1 in 7 chance of finding a complement to that, right? If they're all equally distributed. That's not really a great way of determining your soulmate, just going down and taking one person in 7. That'll do. That's back to our 66 combinations of star signs. It's not how humans work. There is an infinite multitude of human traits and things in relationships that make them work or not work. Sometimes I'm asked too about, well, David, you're not being very fair. What about the fact the moon can affect tides, so surely it can affect us? Right, this goes back to a misunderstanding of how absolutely weak gravity is. Gravity seems very strong to us because we live on a very heavy planet. And it just about keeps us from floating off into space, right? You can throw a ball into the air. That ball is escaping the Earth's gravitational field. It is eventually pulled back down. But you are able to do that, right? The moon has a much smaller mass than Earth. That's why if you look at footage of astronauts on the moon, they can seem to jump really high. Well, they could, because it wasn't pulling them as much. Gravity is a really weak force, but it acts at huge distances, and it's related to both the mass of an object, so how heavy it is, and the distance you are away from it. We are very close to the moon in astronomical terms, and even then its influence is kind of weak. Tens and thousands, millions of years ago, the moon was much closer, and it had a much stronger effect on tides. And it still has an effect on tides to this day. But tides aren't people. It takes the moon's entire mass to kind of affect a tide. It doesn't affect relationships in any way that makes any sense. It doesn't pull you out of the atmosphere straight towards it, right? So this whole argument about what about the moon having, gravitational pull doesn't really make sense in the face of it. But my very favorite thing about this whole phenomenon, because I mean, when I get sent these, I'm like, well, will I cover this? And this one's kind of fun, because I read an article, I think it was ABC News in Australia, and they got to debunk this. And this is what I love. They didn't ask an astronomer or a physicist or a psychologist. No, they asked an astrologer who's really annoyed about this. And I want to quote him because it's just brilliant what he gave out about, because it's very funny to me. And the quote he actually said in this middle of giving out about everything is he said that, astrological compatibility is much more complicated. He says it can't be broken down to a simple TikTok trend regarding moon phases. Okay, yeah, I absolutely agree with that. And then, after saying that, he goes in, there are more important factors, yeah. And I'm thinking he might say something about relationships or, psychological compatibility. He goes, like astrological alignments and planetary placements at the time of your birth, none of which affect anything. And him giving out about this trend, it has, the meme of Spider-Man pointing at himself with an accusatory finger. It's just that. It's one quack giving out to a new quackery that's threatening their quackery. So that is pretty much where we're at. Nothing new under the sun, just old nonsense in new robes. Wash, rinse, and repeat. There we go.